mid-year budget report. Item we're all here for tonight. Gary.
Yes, thank you. That's my pleasure to give you, provide this opportunity for you to comment on the first 6 months of fiscal activity with the city. Just a couple comments about the overview of the, oops, here we go. Yes, the overview of the report. As you know, every quarter we do a review of the city's finances, including all funds, general fund, and all the other non-general funds, including cemetery and Measure Z. And when it gives us, at these opportunities, it gives us a chance to realign our estimates through the budget with what's actually occurring during the course of the year. So that's why we bring these to you every quarter, is for that opportunity to review it, make any changes, or change direction when necessary. So for this report, this report's a little bit different in that we have the standard review, plus we have the SB 130 monies that are being made available to us. SB 130 funds are the replacement of the motor vehicle license fee funds that we've been deprived of for over six years. So let me start with the budget. As you know, it was adopted last June 28th, last summer. It was a 2-year budget. The first year, we're experiencing that now. And the second year of the budget, fiscal year 18-19, is for planning purposes. So the appropriations that you made in June were just for this particular year. You authorized us to spend money this fiscal year. And we presented you a plan to spend the funds in this 18-19, which we'll revisit that in June. We also held a first quarter report, October 11th. And not too much activity to report fiscally during the first quarter because financial activity lags within these the systems that we're involved with. Come mid-year, which ended December 31st, we'd spent at that point in time we spent about 37% of our general fund budget, and we received about 27% of our general fund revenues. So typically for your business, you say you got a cash flow problem. Well, the way that works is that we receive the majority of our funds in January and May. So yeah, we do have a cash flow issue, but we rely upon our reserves to cover us during that time period for that overlap. And we will see those numbers significantly change at the third quarter report when you see the monies from January property tax monies are entered into the system. So it's not unusual to be in these fiscal conditions at this time. It will correct itself. We'll go to the next. Oops, I go too far. So yes, how are we doing? The blue lines being our trends in property tax since the city's incorporation. You can see it's continually started off rather high at 3.6 when we first incorporated. We went through the recession. Now we're slowly having our stable comeback for the property tax region. Our sales tax, which is in the red bars, you can see that's being reduced during the recession also, and now stabilizing and starting to increase. And the orange colored bars, that's the motor vehicle license fee monies that we were receiving. You can see the void that we have from about 2012 through 2017. And you can see the resumption of it starting in 2017, 2018. Well, that's about 2.3 million that we'll be introducing to the budget this year. So overall, we're doing well. We're on the recovery. We're stable at these levels, but nothing too dramatic to be concerned about with our fiscal revenue situation. The recommendations for the general fund. Our revenues about, our budget was 5.7, for $10,578,000, $10.6 million. We're requesting a change to increase that by $2.5 million. The bulk of that being the introduction of the SB 130 funds. Expenditures, we're asking to increase those $169,000, and that results from a number of primarily cleanup items that were overlooked when we did the original budget process, and some contractual services, development, legal expenses, and compensation items for the $169,000. The fund balance, we see a significant jump there, going from $857,000, which is 8% of our operating expenditures, to what we're projecting, or what we're recommending, is going into $3.2 million for reserve, which is 30%. Now, that's a big number. We'll be walking through that. That $3.2 million includes the $2.4 million that we are getting from the SB 130 funds. Okay. But we have to make this request first, and then we can, when we go to the decision packages, you can decide how you want to allocate those funds. Okay. So if we had so what this says, with $3.2 million reserve, that's about $2 million more than the required 10% reserve. Okay. So we go on to the requested changes. Any changes in the staffing? Yes, we're adding back, in this report, we're adding back in the building official position. It was in last year's budget, and it was left off when we came forward with the budget in June. So we're going to add that position back in. It's a no-cost item because it swaps out the contractual services costs that are currently being incurred would be converted to salary costs. We're asking that the part-time administrative aid position that was in last year's budget be added back into this year's budget. And we're requesting that 2 intern level 2s, which are the graduate student interns, that we have capacity for those in this year's budget. So that's the recommended staffing changes. The decision packages. So what you have is very small print.
Yeah, hard to read.
Let me see if I can summarize this. Okay, well, I'll read it to you. What we did, as you know, we got $2.4 million of SB 130 funds. And then we asked the departments, okay, how should we spend this money? What are the top priorities for the community? And police, as you know, when we took the reduction back in 2011, police reduced their budget by $1.5 million. They went from 70 hours of service down to 40. So we asked them, what kind of scenarios can you provide for us? So they recommend a couple different options. One option being to come back up to 70 hours from the current 40 that they're at, and keep the CSO. You know, we had the CSO level position about a year ago. So it would be to come back up to the 70 hours of service level, including the CSO. That would be about a $2 million charge to do that on a recurring basis, annual basis. If we wanted to go up to 80 hours of service, and adding another 10 hours, that'd be about another $683,000 to do that. And then if we wanted to add a motorcycle for traffic or other patrol services, it's about $368,000 to add a motorcycle, of which about $40,000 of that is one-time startup costs. So the recurring cost is about $340,000 on a recurring basis for the motor officers. So that's some of the items that they suggested to us. We asked the fire department, what kind of needs do you have that benefit the community? They had a great idea to and a 2-person paramedic squad for the community to improve the response rates, because the majority of the calls that they get are medical related. That would be about $784,000 to set that up for the first year, and then thereafter it'd be about $634,000 on a recurring basis. They also recommended that we implement the fire marshal program, sharing that with City of Lake Elsinore. And it's basically a no-cost item because the fees generated for inspections would pay for the position. But to start it up, we would have to do some one-time activities with city staff and with the fire department for about $15,000 to do that. The firehouse improvements, as you know, we, the city, own the firehouse over on Rule Street, Station 61. They have a number of recommendations for improvements, about $97,200 worth of improvements that are needed at the fire station, including a new kitchen, new gear lockers, or a new kitchen, a remodeled kitchen rather, new gear lockers, the gate apparatus, the HVAC system, the air conditioning and heating system needs to be replaced. So there's, so those items were recommended. Additionally, looking downstream, Fire was suggesting that we set aside $250,000 for a future purchase of land on the west side of the freeway in anticipation of relocating Station 61 for better service for the community. As you know, 61 is located on Rule Street. There's some other areas to the north, west that would be more beneficial as far as response times. So they asked us to set aside $250,000 for that, purchase the land and build the station sometime in the future. So that was a request that was made. Public Works, we went over to Dan's shop and said, okay, what's your wish list? So he rolled out all these pictures of streets that needed repair and dirt roads that needed to become streets. And so a lot of items coming out of Public Works. $102,000 was requested to do numerous speed zone studies throughout the city. $250,000 was asked for the road maintenance crew that we have, the 2 guys, to retain that service level for the next 5 months. Repairs on Cottonwood and Lost Road, grading activities on there, that was requested. The pavement repair, pavement repairs on Bryant Street, Central Street, Palomar, were all included in the list for another $462,000. A lot of needs came out of this process. Went over to Daniel and asked Daniel, what can we do in the parks? And he said, it's pretty hot out there when he's sitting around the swings. He'd like to see some shade tarps over the tot lots. So we said, how much would that cost? He got the estimates. It's about $50,000 estimate to put the shade tarps up on the tot lots at Marna and at Woodstock Park. The administration, when we, what would uses would be appropriate for these funds, to bring the city's reserves up to a 15% level. In other words, 15% of your general fund operating budget is set aside for reserve for the rainy day and the mishaps or for the next recession that comes along. That would cost us about $1.1 million. Out of this 2.4, setting aside $1.1 million one time to achieve that 15% reserve. $250,000 would be needed to pay back Fund 250, which was the old the Parks LMD fund that was the old park assessment fund, where we refunded $28 per parcel because the county had improperly prepared the assessment district. So paying that back is about $265,000. The establishing an operating budget contingency, which is a which is an action that would put roughly $200,000 inside of the operating budget. We have a $10 million operating, well, $12 million operating budget now. It would keep $200,000 there for those sudden and immediate needs for those known, unknown activities that occur during the fiscal year. So it's recommended that we put some of those funds aside. We've had a number of requests for implementing video streaming and recording of public meetings for Planning Commission and City Council. We've gone through a couple demos, reviewed some of these firms that provide these services and the benefits of them, and to go forward with that would be about $60,000 in equipment, training, and servicing of that process. $17,000 from the planning department was asked for the multifamily parking ordinance. We had talked about revising the ordinance for multifamily areas. There's not enough parking in some of the townhouse projects. It's always a concern. So we were asked to take a look at that, to have staff engage in that service fee, about $17,000. So a number of items, like, you know, $6.9 million worth of requests on how to spend this $2.3 million. So, as I mentioned, so in looking at all these requests of $6.9 million, how do we put a handle on this or make some recommendations? So in looking at the first year's funding that we currently have available, and we did receive the check January 31st.
Yes.
We got the first 50% check of these funds is about $1.2 million.
Right.
And we will get the second check in end of May
Right.
for the other $1.2 million. So the state made good on their promise to pay us. It cleared, right?
It did clear.
That
So,
was my next question.
and it was a check, it wasn't a wire.
Yeah, it wasn't.
They wanted the
which
lag
was
time,
weird.
float time, so
Yeah.
to keep that interest. So how do we provide you with some guidance or some recommendations on what to do with these funds? Well, if the highest priorities, you know, public safety, public infrastructure, the streets, so what can we do in those areas? And then our fiscal stability, the rainy day fund. So I provided you with a document that's colored on the spreadsheet. If you look at the blue column on this, that's the same as what we're going to review up here. We have a number of items that were requested, and if we did, in going down the list, looking at public safety first, at the police levels, if we went up to the levels that we were at before, the 70 hours per day, retaining the CSO, and if they started around the April-May timeframe to phase that in, because it takes them a while to gear up for this, you know, to have that type of manpower back onto the force. There'll be about a $40,000 expense, $400,000 expense this fiscal year. Next year, it would be $2.3 million for the full. It would be over $2 million for the full year next year. Okay. So that's one recommendation. There's other options. I mean, you could go up to 80 hours a day for another, you know, $700,000. We could add some motorcycles to it, $350,000 apiece. So that's, you know, for you to discuss. The fire station, we recommended that we make the improvements to the fire station, the kitchen repairs, the HVAC system, repairing the gates, providing adequate, you know, updated lockers for their gear. That's about $107,000 of those funds. Increasing the reserves up to the 15% level, it's $1,075,600 to do that. We had requested a $200,000 contingency amount reserve we put in the operating budget, reducing that down to $100,000 contingency to put into the operating budget for a reserve. Closing out the old park assessment fund, $265,000. Repairing Bundy Canyon berms and shoulders, it's a minor amount, $5,000, but it's an on-budget item, that's why we're bringing it back to you for this. Pavement repairs, there's a lot of things Dan wants to do, but what can we afford? I mean, it's like $500,000 to do the additional repairs. What we can afford, and we're recommending that we can afford right now is $50,000 to be added to the SB1 funds to accommodate the increases in material costs that are happening with the SB1 activity throughout the state. So SB1, that's, you know, the new gas tax, and we've got a listing of projects that are going to be completed with that. Well, those project costs are creeping up now because all of a sudden everybody's busy doing road projects. So they've escalated about $50,000. So this funding would help assure that we could get those jobs completed within the reasonable time frame and for that amount of funding. Speed zone studies, they had asked for $102,000. We're recommending just 25% of that amount. $25,000 to do some speed zone studies, and that may be enough monies to get us going to start, get enough work going to match up with some future grants in this area. So we're looking at blending that and increasing that activity through grant funds. Public work maintenance, we had about $500,000 there and things that we wanted to do, but realistically, funding the two-man work crew that we have for the next 5 months for $250,000, that's about the minimum efforts that we could do with public works at this time. The shade structures for the parks, $50,000. We recommend that you go forward with that. And the video streaming of the meetings, of the planning commission meetings and the city council meetings. Benefit to the community, benefit for staff, the productivity. It helps us with our workloads here. So we're recommending that we go forward with that item also. So that's basically the recommendations that are on your worksheet with the blue column. And those are only recommendations. It is providing you, as I mentioned, you the opportunity to consider some of the things that we didn't include in that blue column. We didn't include adding 10 more hours to patrol that the police wanted to do. Or we didn't add any motorcycles for traffic patrols. The paramedic squad is not in the recommendations that we gave you. But it's a big price, big ticket item, it's $700 and some odd thousand. The funding relocation of Station 61, we didn't, we're not recommending that at this time because we have other, needed priorities. Streets, we're deferring improvements on Lost and Cottonwood. That's $250,000 to do that. We're deferring pavement repairs on Bryant, Central, and Palomar. It's $412,000 to make those improvements. We just don't have funds to do that right now. And the speed zone, as I mentioned, we'll be seeking grants to complement 75. We're recommending we fund 25%. We'll see if we can get grants for the other 75. And then the planning, the multifamily parking ordinance amendment, we're not recommending that we do that at this time due to the items that we're prioritizing. So, we're recommending a lot of items, but there's a lot more that this community needs that we just can't afford at this time. We need to find ways to achieve these. I mean, what this money does at $2.3 million, that just gets us back to the levels we were at in 2011. We're not getting ahead. Okay, so that's the challenge that we have before us. And as far as, well, yes, this is the end of the loss of the motor vehicle license fee era. We're putting that to rest. And want to bring up a point we talked about, in the state, and what started that was SB 89. When the governor signed SB 89 in 2011, that took 22% of our budget away from us. And it's been like that for the last.
For all these years, yeah.
Pardon?
6 months.
I said for all these years.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I
right,
mean-
22% for all these, for the last 6 years. Yeah, over $12 million
Yeah.
total. So, that's what triggered all this, is ongoing. But during that time period, I mean, we had very little staff turnover. And we had one person leave, and he went up the street to Santa Clarita. But everybody else, I mean, out of all the people that stayed during those 6 years, and, you know, did more with less, you know, all the cost cutting efforts that we did, was really quite an effort, you know, for the community and for staff. The contract employers that we had, Interwest, PV Maintenance, Williams and Sorensen, everybody pitched in to make this thing work, to get us to where we are today, which will be a stable fiscal position. So I just want to say, you know, take time to say thanks for everybody who did all that effort, pitched in, and helped us get there. It was really quite a journey. I've never been one that long, but it was over 6 years for myself, Danny, and Jeanette. We were the ones who wrote out the entire 6 years of doing without, and we stayed. Everybody, you know, we had 1/3 turnover. Costs are 30% of salary. So we had one person leave during that 6-year time period. Our annual salary budget is $1.3 million. So somebody leaves, 30% of their salary is how much more we're gonna pay to replace that position. And we had one, so that's the savings of a lot of money.
Yes.
So that's why we're recommending a recognition of staff for putting in and being loyal to the organization, doing more with less, and recognizing them with a one-time vacation day per year of service during that time period.
And how many hats each one of you has worn and stepped to the plate to get the job done, to keep us as a city. I don't know that we could have made it without the employees and the staff that we had. And there's not a lot of them. How many total?
Well, 13.
13 total staff that have kept this city together. I'm really proud of you guys, really.
Well, thank you. That goes a long way for the staff and the efforts that we put in. Appreciate those comments. It's nice to be appreciated. So before you tonight is recommendations for decision packages for you to consider, and the recognition of city staff, you know, during that time period. We consider that's the 2 resolutions for you tonight.
All right, before we get to discussion, I've got 3 comment cards, so Kathleen,
I'll have,
you're good?
yeah,
It says live streaming.
for now. Yeah.
I'm with you. All right, Monty, come on down.
Well, I actually hate to do this, but I have to. First off, I want you to know, I appreciate the city staff, and I appreciate the service all you guys do. But I also recognize this is a city that's operating on a shoestring and will continue to do so for a long time. The decision you made earlier on 1.3 is going to give another day of vacation to the staff, which as you see is growing. There are all these, we used to brag about having contract employees because that was a better, more cost-efficient way of doing business. Now we're going the other way, and I'm sure we can argue the logic of that. But the bottom line is that was a significant decision you made, in my opinion. I had been prepared to recommend and endorse that you do this recognition thing. I have to retract that endorsement or not make it because of the extra day of vacation he gave. Now, both of them are justified by the governor signing SB 130. And like you said, SB 130 gets us back to where we were. I'll tell you one thing, one of the hardships they had to do in the city was going from 5/8s to 4/10s in work weeks. I'd have taken a pay cut when I was working to work 4/10s in lieu of 5/8s. 3-day weekend every week, right on. That brings up a comment I have. Before I do that, though, I do want to mention, before I forget, I reviewed the wish list. My reaction is we need more police. 70 hours is not enough. That gets us back to no traffic enforcement where we were after about the first year of being a city. We need some traffic enforcement. You heard it again a couple times tonight. With that said, once this $60,000 kitchen gets installed in the fire department, please invite me to come see it. I want to see it. I think it must be really impressive. But now, getting back to it, I'm not going to reread, but I've already mentioned, and I'm going to say I don't endorse this recognition only because I think the staff has already been recognized by awarding another day's vacation permanently for current and future employees. There is one thing. If you approve this one-time holiday floating vacation day, I do have at least one thought. As a civil engineer who enjoys math and desires both sides of the equation to be equal, I am bothered that a hypothetical 6-year, 4-day, 10-hour per week employee will get 60 hours of paid vacation time, while a hypothetical 6-day, 6-year, 5-day, 8-hour week employee will only get 48 hours of vacation time. Probably should fix this. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Kenny?
Rather than giving bonuses to employees that had a job the whole time, the city would be better served by fixing our fire station and adding signage to that building stating that it belongs to the city of Wildomar. Thank you.
All right, those are all the public comment cards I have on this item. Questions for staff?
It's actually a small item, but one more thing I wanted to throw in for the decision package is TIPS, the Trauma Intervention Program. At the beginning of cityhood, I don't think we were doing anything. And then last year, was it the first year, Gary?
Yeah,
Last year, we paid $2,000 a year. But the other cities that use Trauma Intervention Program, they pay 12 cents per resident. So this year, Trauma Intervention Program would like to request $4,000, and that's actually rounded down, because we have 35,782 residents. By 12 cents would be about 4,600, so actually rounded down to 4,000. But this is something that I think our emergency personnel can attest to, that they provide emotional support and trauma services to the victims and families involved with traumatic events. So rather just something to throw in there. It's $4,000 a year, and I actually just think it's something we should include in the budget going forward, because this is something that is needed.
Okay. So how are we doing this right now? We're gonna go through and each of the recommendations and approve it that way, or?
I think the first question would be if there's support for just staff recommendation, and then if there's not, if we have other things you want to suggest.
There's some money, you brought it up, but the kitchen and the fire station, item number 4, the 60K, I want to make sure I'm reading it right.
that's correct.
I just can't see the justification there. I read through the staff report, so I would want to line that out and either apply it to, I don't have an idea of what apply it to. I just can't justify taking 60 grand for a kitchen when we have roads that don't work that well. So I would take 60 grand a year with Dan's 5K.
Well, would you like fire department to explain a little bit more about
Yeah,
that?
I mean, that would be great. I read through this. I mean, it sounds like the kitchen works.
I know they have problems with the drainage system in the kitchen.
Todd, could you come on down and give us a little update on what that 60,000 is for the?
Sure, you bet.
Well, the HVAC.
So for the kitchen, Station 61 was built back in the late 70s, early 80s as a residence. And it was then used as a volunteer fire company station with just folks coming and going. And then sometime around I think it was 89, the county staffed that with paid staff, 2 firefighters around the clock. And there's been no improvements made to the kitchen facilities in that time, other than putting Formica countertops over the original cabinets, which are separating from the walls, and screws are coming out. I mean, guys are going to the hardware store regularly to make those repairs. So what we're doing is we're wanting to future-proof this building. It's the one building the city owns, so that it can be repurposed at a later time when 61 is eventually replaced and relocated.
But you wanna enjoy that kitchen while you're there.
Yeah, we want to extend the service life of that kitchen. So we have 3 firefighters there now 24 hours a day. And so it was built to a residential standard. And unlike your home, when you leave in the morning and the kids are gone at school and you're gone at work, we got 3 firefighters cooking 3 meals a day, running the dishwasher 3 times, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
So does that answer your?
It does, yeah, it does, thank you, and I'm glad you clarified some of it. I'm just thinking of the justification, you know, so I look at 60 grand as being a lot of money for a kitchen, you know what I mean? So that's, and reading the detailed staff report with it, it makes some sense, that you clarified some of the questions, so.
Well, it's gotta be a hardened kitchen, it's not just not buying the same hardware we're gonna buy if we go down to Home Depot.
No, I get it, and when people go to the kitchen, my concern is they're gonna see lavish granite countertops and, you know, crazy things. Oh, this is what we're spending money on, and, you know, that's all, that was it. I just have to be judicious with this.
Well, my question would be, who's gonna put in the kitchen for 60 grand? I mean, that's a lot of money for any kitchen. I don't care where you're at, but that's an expensive kitchen. So
That's the budget cost that we're going with is what our strategic planning bureau provided us based on what they've been paying for kitchen remodels similar to the footprint that we're working with. So what
So
we're
it
gonna.
hasn't gone for bid or anything yet?
No.
That's just an
No.
estimate?
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's an estimate.
Right.
And who does that go out to bid through? You guys or through us, since we own the building?
We're gonna work through our strategic planning bureau to come up with the scope of work, and then we're gonna put it out to bid. We're gonna sub it out. We're gonna utilize our strategic planning bureau and our fire department staff to project manage it, so we don't have to hire a general contractor and save some money, and then sub it out. And we've also
We'll all
got,
see
we've
those,
also got those 2 sliding glass windows that are single pane, energy inefficient, so we're gonna frame those in and stucco them, and on the front of the station, we're gonna put windows above, and then there will be cabinets there, and then on the parking lot, parking side where that other sliding window is, that's gonna be framed in, we're gonna put a man door with a window in it to, you know, help with the energy efficiency of the building as well. And then the second HVAC system, there's 2. One of them was replaced when the bedrooms, when the baths were remodeled prior to the city conveying ownership. The other HVAC system is for the rest of the fire station, and it's 22 years old.
And that's a separate cost, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
that's a separate budget decision.
With the kitchen itself, the main issues, the sliding glass doors, the windows, and the cabinets,
Cabinets, and
And the
then,
appliances?
well, and then doing some reconfiguration there, we're gonna take out
Bar?
it's the island and open it up and make it more of a usable space.
And it hasn't been done here since the 80s.
no, yeah. I get
And we're
the
looking at
easy-
light, we're
I'm just
looking at
making-
It's the
electrical,
original
lighting,
kitchen that was in
plumbing,
the house when the
cabinets,
house was built.
counters,
Well, that's pretty good.
drywall, stucco, framing, windows.
And you're still on a septic tank, aren't you?
What's that?
You're still on a septic tank?
Yes.
I'm not hating on kitchen, I'm just asking the questions because
Certainly.
in here, and, you know, this is what, you know, the public sees and, you know, the recommendation and why, it's windows and, you know,
Mhm.
and it's old, you know,
Yeah.
so, I mean,
So when you look at a home, if you were gonna go do a full kitchen remodel, strip down to
Yeah.
the studs, drywall, electric, plumbing, cabinets, windows and so forth, 60,000 would probably maybe seem like a little high on the scale, but we're working with a public facility, and we're also gonna have to be working with those costs of the contractors.
and you're gonna pay a little more because it's being used continuously. I get that, that part actually, I think the most compelling piece is that it's used 24 hours. There's no, like you said, you know, when I leave for work, the house isn't used when I'm gone, you know what I mean? So it's, the shelf life is cut in half or increased by
3
you
times.
know, 100% because I'm gone for.
And that investment in that facility is gonna be a good investment for the future as well, because we're gonna be able to use that facility in the future for other purposes as well.
Okay.
Will that get you any new kitchen utensils?
Sure.
All right. That is the most terrible kitchen I've ever been in, I'm sorry. You've ever tried to do dishes in
It's
there?
painted plywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's painted plywood.
Well, since you're here, can you tell us a little about the gear lockers and the fencing too?
So the gear lockers were purchased, gosh, probably 15 years ago, and the current NFPA standards require a certain amount of ventilation, so that so our turnout gear, it gets wet, it gets sweaty, and then it absorbs the carcinogens that we're exposed to. So when we wash our apparel and store it, it needs to be in a well-ventilated area, otherwise that causes a lot of problems. And so that's an NFPA requirement and an OSHA requirement
Okay.
for the ventilation.
And then the gate, the fencing of the gate.
And then the gate and the fencing is falling down. Yeah.
Whatever, I'm just joking. Okay.
So earlier when there was a question about the bush covering the fire hydrant, if you pulled up, you're gonna find the fire hydrant, right?
I would have to go look at the area, so the blue, it's not a dot, it's a cap for the shut off for the hydrant. It could be in any four corners.
Oh, so it might not be
Intersection,
there, but-
yeah, so we took a note of that, and we'll follow up and get the information from Gary and get with EVMWD and address the leaky hydrant and the bushes.
And the hidden hydrant, I'm curious if it's there. I wanna know.
Okay,
We can follow it.
we'll get a before and after picture for you.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah. I think that's all the questions I had, Todd, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Todd.
Well,
All right, I feel better with that, I had to ask the questions.
I have a question for Dan Ann. So Dan, can you come up for a second, Captain? My question is related to when we bring back this, bring us back to 70 hours. One of the things that we've all struggled with as a council for the last 5 years is pretty much we know when we say, hey, can you go look at the speeding issue on this particular street? The response has always been for the last 5 years, we really don't have enough people to go dedicate anyone to doing that. Can you tell us what's gonna happen once this is brought back up?
Yes, if you decide to go back to the 70 hours, what essentially that's going to do, it does bring us only back up to those 2011 service levels. Of course, we would want to push forward as we can financially.
Sure.
But what that does is essentially gives us another guy per shift. As you know, we've stepped up to take those hits to save the money, but it resulted in, on average, one guy on at a time. What happens is we got to focus on those calls for service priority. That doesn't give us much flexibility for targeted enforcement, traffic enforcement, things of that nature. We're bringing in resources from the county and such as we need for officer safety reasons only, but of course as a contract then we pull those sources back out when they need to go handle the other issues. So bringing it back up to 70 or 80 or whatever else that you decide as a council will give us that flexibility to have some more targeted enforcement for either traffic, quality of life issues, etc. At least give us that
Some flexibility.
Some flexibility, correct. We're still it's gonna depend on the workload and calls for service at the time, but it is gonna give us, me and my department, that flexibility to target those issues when you call us.
Great.
I have a question. So, numbers, and Gary, if I'm wrong, tell me, please. A motorcycle cop, we're looking at $300,000, $380,000. That's a year, right? And that's for a full-time equivalent?
It's for a dedicated motor officer position. I believe it's around 330, 340 annually. I believe Gary was building in, there's about a $30,000, $40,000 startup cost with training the motorcycle, etc. So there is some maintenance costs that we build into that. So when you're looking at that cost, that's just for the motor officer and all the support that goes along with it that's built into that dedicated.
That we end up paying for. Now, is there a way, and that was an FTE, right? That was...
Correct.
Okay, so full-time motor cop. Is there a way, is this offered, is this doable to maybe take that 360 and pay for a quarter of it? Where we get a motorcycle traffic cop for X amount of hours out of the day? Just to be creative? I mean, is that a thing?
No, we can't. The way the contract is set up for a dedicated officer, it's a particular, there's training that goes into it, there's staff that has to be there, and so it's a dedicated position where they're gonna be there on their days that they work, they're not gonna be there on the days that are off, unlike the patrol function where we contract for hours. We have a certain amount of full-time equivalents that we get to the station to make sure we have those hours. So for example, if you have 40 hours a day, you know, you need 8 officers to fill that with, you know, both sides of the week. But for dedicated positions for like CSOs, problem-oriented police and officers, you have that dedicated one person because of the specialty training that goes into it. Now, what we can do and what some of my thoughts were with traffic-related issues is sometimes if we can get those base hours back up to 70, or for example, if we can add 10 and go to 80 in the future or now, whatever the council decides, it gives me some flexibility to build in, take some of those patrol hours and build in a traffic car that I can get some training to. And what that does is it gives, on the busy end of the week, I can have someone dedicated to just traffic enforcement, accidents, DUIs, maybe some targeted enforcement. And then the other end of the week when he's off, because it's patrol hours, that kind of builds up some of those hours that are not being used that I could use for targeted enforcement. So I've done that to kind of do more with less and be more flexible. Again, that would be above and beyond the 70. The 70 is just going to kind of get us back to where we were, give us just a little bit of flexibility, but there's some creative ways that we can do that. Ultimately, you guys, most of you know the benefits of motor officers, getting in and out of places, being high visibility for schools, having the extra training, doing the radar enforcement and speed, and you know, all the traffic related issues are a benefit, but there is an expensive upfront cost and a recurring cost with that. I think I recommend motor officers. I don't know that we're there yet. I think we need to get back up to the 70 or possibly the 80 in the near future, and then we can revisit those as time goes on. I'd be more than happy to work with whatever decision you guys go with.
And do you use tip? You call it out for tip, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We use our chaplain service and tip on any call. They're very crucial when we have anything from domestic violence, baby deaths, traumatic traffic accident scenes that is hard for people to handle. We'll call them out and they'll be able to provide counseling services and things of that nature, so it frees up our officer and provides those mental health assistance to the citizens when we go out there, and to the officers sometimes.
So there's really no way around it. All right.
We've tried.
Yeah, no, I have to ask the question, right, so.
What happens, let's say one more thing about the motor officer. There's another thing that we can do is as we get there here, maybe the next year or two, we don't have to go with like 2 motor officers, we can go with 1. Wildomar is such a small city, but normally we wouldn't recommend just 1 motor officer, but because it's out of the Lake Elsinore Station where I oversee Lake Elsinore and the county, I have a motor team in Lake Elsinore that would oversee that motor officer as well, or provide the guidance and training so he can kind of piggyback on that crew and kind of be part of that team, but he would be paid for by Wildomar. So it gives us some flexibility there with costs and kind of slowly building that traffic team in the future, and that's an option I would recommend as we go forward to kind of feel it out and see how it goes, starting with 1 and then maybe building to 2.
Is this 360, the 381 each, is that one bike, or is that a pair?
That's for 1.
Okay.
That's one
Wish it was
training
for
the
a pair.
bike.
I thought we were getting creative again, all right, so. Okay.
We need you.
No, it's one motorcycle,
Yeah.
1 officer,
Yes.
training, they have
Yes.
cost,
Okay.
381,600.
Correct. And I would just leave you with, as you make the decisions, that I think the community really does feel the impacts over the years. We do as a police agency.
Absolutely.
We've had steady inclining population over the last 6-7 years by about 6,000 or 7,000 people, and our service levels haven't gone up to match that. So I think we're all on the same page. I support whatever you guys do, and I'll work with you to make that happen if we have to. I spoke with Gary for this current fiscal year, ease back into it. We'll do that for the money that's left over for the mid-year budget adjustment, and for the following years we'll follow suit and get you guys
So
up to
if
speed.
you had to pick, so if we go up to 70 hours,
That's 80 hours and 2 motorcycle officers, I know
would
what you
you
pick.
pick the 10 hours or the motorcycle?
You know, obviously you asked me, I want the world, but I'm not going to do that. I don't think, in listening to the presentation and working with the city for the years, I don't think it'd be fiscally responsible to go straight out with the 80 hours and 2 motor officers. I think what at the minimum you need to add back to the 70
70.
minimum. My preference would be the
One.
80. Gives me a little bit more flexibility. I could build in some traffic-related targeted enforcement with that, and I think we'd see a lot more bang for our buck initially. I'm okay with the 70. I would request the 80. I just think I can get a lot more done with that, and then that kind of staves off the motor issue for a couple more years, and we can grow into that.
Yeah, the 80 is twice as much. I mean, as the motorcycle, for the 80, it would be another 683,000.
Yeah.
Because you have to have how many full-time employees to cover the 10 hours? It's almost two and three quarters or something,
Right.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the cost for cost, you can also do the 70 plus one motor officer. It's
That's
the
what I was
same as the
thinking.
80.
That's what I was thinking.
But it's the
70
same.
plus one more expensive.
It's the same cost, so whether you do 80 with no motor officer or 70 with one.
And then they're gonna be pulling them over, because the next complaints we'll get is.
Right,
"We
but
need to pull
again,
over all the
remember
time."
with the 80, I could target 10 of those hours a day toward a dedicated traffic car. And you won't have the startup costs of a motor, you won't have the training initially with the motor, but I can take some of those patrol hours and dedicate it to traffic-related issues, so we could still get some of those enforcement-type functions done, not as efficient that the motors can do in some of these other areas, but we can do targeted enforcement and handle really a lot of the crashes, which is, we do have a lot of crashes in Wildomar for the city, even though compared to other cities, I'm told we're very good. That's why, one of the reasons why we didn't get that grant, because we don't have a problem as other similar cities. However, we ask the community, I think, we see it a different way. And so the more enforcement we have on traffic, obviously the safer our streets are. And that's been proven through statistics.
40 hours and 5 bike cops, you know?
We gotta get patrol back up. These guys are killing
Just
it.
kidding.
I know. Any other questions? Be happy to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Well,
Well, I will, I think my questions are answered, and I have no objections to the recommendations. No.
Good. Not the motorcycle part.
Well, when I look at the total under the reoccurring, right now we're showing a surplus, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, of $70,000 on the reoccurring side, right?
Yeah, for that to go in forward for next year, that's correct, yes.
And a surplus of 4,000 this year.
That's correct.
So if we added tip in,
Yeah,
right now, we would be changing our formula from 2,000 to 4,000, so it's only $1,000 more for this year, right? To close out this fiscal year.
No, there's actually 4,000 left over if you do the recommendations, so it would leave it $100.
aren't we already doing two?
Yeah, tip, it's already in the budget to do 2,000.
I don't know, no, do you have 2,000, no, you didn't have 2,000 in the budget.
I thought you said we did that this last year.
We did it last year,
last year we did it for 2,000, a
right,
year ago.
but it wasn't
We
included.
didn't include it in this current budget.
Got it. So, but even if we, okay, so if we turn it back on this year,
Right.
it would be, just to close out this last half of the fiscal year, would be $2,000.
Oh, no, it'd be less than, I don't know, it'd be less than that probably, I don't know exactly.
Well,
But yeah, you're right, less than 2,000.
Their ask is for $4,000 ongoing, right?
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
Okay,
less
so
than
to
2,000.
close out the end of this fiscal year would be $2,000.
and then $2,000 starting July 1st would be another allowance.
Well, $4,000.
4,000 for the calendar year, is that how they work?
Right.
Yeah, for that.
Can we
Okay,
start
so
that
then
July
this year would be
1st?
2,000, next year it would be 2,000 from July through December.
Right, and then for 4,000 for the total.
Okay,
So my recommendation, if we're gonna go with the staff recommendation, is to at least add tip back in. So that brings us down to $2,000 for this fiscal, to close out this fiscal year, and brings us down another $4,000 next year. So now we're at 66,000.
okay.
I'd like to do a whole lot more. Obviously, we all
We
would.
all would.
There's just not enough.
Public safety, I mean,
Public safety and
No,
fire.
we're waiting for police the whole time, all of us.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing.
Yep.
Well, I just want to say a couple comments, because earlier about, there was a gentleman, I think he left, and he was saying that we seem reluctant to do the speed bumps. Well, on here is speed bumps cost us, to go out, we can't just go out and do a speed bump, we have to do a survey, we have to do, there's startup costs, and so if you felt that way, it's because we had to first allocate the funds to do
No,
the
I spoke
speed
to him
bump.
also. I spoke to him on a while back and told them that speed bumps are not feasible in certain areas because of the traffic flow, and also for the fire department. That was one of the issues, and I know he's on Wesley because I've sat there and watched what he's talking about, and everybody does that on that street, so. But it's not feasible where it's at, so. And we discussed that with Dan about the stop signs, and it's not warranted there. But with the police officer floating around the traffic time, and we know where these people are, and we know where they're rushing
And you
at.
know what's worse? They're one of us.
I know,
They
oh,
live
it's always somebody that lives
They
in
live
there. Yeah, I know.
We're your neighbor.
Because I don't think most people go into Marietta except for cutting across Wesley.
Oh, they
They're
don't
going
go,
all the way to
they
Grand.
don't go into Marietta because they got it covered. They come into Wildomar, Marietta does,
Yeah, we've seen them.
every day.
So there's no way to
Slows
get
everybody
the
down.
motorcycle?
I say just paint the side of a motorcycle on the side of our patrol car. There you go.
Hey,
It
Gary,
looks pretty.
this top line, number one, the 1,075,000,
Yes,
that is,
To get us to a 15% reserve.
okay, that's for our reserve, right?
that's correct.
Let's say we, hypothetically, we take out $381,000.
For the motorcycle.
Well, I was doing the math on it earlier. If we went down to a 13% reserve, that's $259,365. So we have to go below 13%.
I think that Gary has led us well. He's
Yeah.
kept us in line all this time, and just because we feel like we've got some money, that's just a feeling we have. We don't have any money. We're not even back to where we were. So I think we need to start off slow. We're gonna look at this throughout the year. If there's some ways we can add some other things, hey, I'm all for adding a motor officer. I volunteered to go write tickets myself. They wouldn't let me, you know. But I just think that we need to stay within his recommendations, that we need this reserve cushion. None of us know what's gonna happen tomorrow or what we might need, or the earthquake that they talked about in Wildomar. I mean, we don't know about these things. And if we don't have reserves, and if we aren't fiscally conservative, we're not gonna get anywhere. We've got time. Let's just take baby steps to start with and go with the recommendations.
What was our reserve balance, our percentage, 2 years ago?
Our reserve balance 2 years
Do
ago,
that percentage,
9%.
9%?
Yeah,
So if 381, if we do 381, what would we be at, 12%?
12.5, 12.
12.5, that's still better than we were at 2 years ago. Is 12.5% outside of your comfort zone as far as the percentage-wise? Or is 15% like a nice to have? I'm asking just because I really would like to.
15% is a,
Gap,
Best practices.
best practice.
is a move for stability at this level with our organization. We're looking at the next 2 years recession, and the downturn in building, which development is, development is a source of funding for the city also, but it's non-recurring.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The 15% is just a flat, that's what we keep in our balance.
Yeah, no, I get that, that's your savings account, right? That's like what you keep there.
Right, we don't get 15% every year,
No, I-
but the
no, I-
reoccurring cost of that cop would be.
I'm looking at,
He was talking about a one-time.
I'm talking just, what we've maintained previously.
Right.
And what would, because that would be recurring, you're correct. But if you take that out, it'd be reoccurring, so we'd be at 12.5 or 13% next year too, right? And the year after that, we just have 31 taken out of it. So is that the accounting principles best practice of 15%?
That's Wildomar's best practice.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called safety.
I'm asking because, I mean, if
What's
your
acceptable?
9% was
Well,
acceptable,
the state,
and we're at
the
30%,
reserve is
why not?
It was never acceptable. It was all we
there is no
had.
minimum for the city.
It was all we
The
had.
GF, the Government Finance Officers Association, is 10%.
Yeah, there's 10, but they really like, yeah, they kind of say at least a minimum of 10, but what they really prefer is 20% actually.
Or 50, yeah.
I mean, more than that, but yeah, but the 20%
You know, what,
is considered really healthy.
No,
what we can
What's the
do in
one-time
this,
thing you're thinking of spending this money?
The motorcycle.
motorcycle cop.
That's not a one-time
Yeah.
expense. Guys. The problem is that's a $300,000.
No, I know, I get that, so, and then, correct me if my logic is wrong with this. So we take out 381, right?
Mhm.
That brings us down to 6 something,
Yeah,
that's the,
but then next year you gotta take another $300,000 out of that reserve again to keep paying for it.
Read all these things we can't do right now.
No,
Every year you
We're
have to
gonna
keep
need
paying
it,
that
they're gonna
$300,000 a year.
I've read the things we can't do.
But they're gonna add up and add up.
What I'm looking at is, we're gonna be down to $600,000. I'm not trying to do your job, I know you're smart and this is your finance thing, I wanna understand it in my head, so when we go,
It's an ongoing thing though, there's a
Yeah, the
problem.
recurring expense, we're gonna get 2.3 million on an annual basis.
Yeah.
Of which 2 million is gonna go to police. So it's, we have 300,000 left over roughly. Well, not really, because we're losing the $300,000 credit.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. That wipes that out.
Okay.
And that was all we're
Good, yep.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
it.
We tried down it.
That was the missing piece.
Yeah, that's fine,
Dan's happy with more guys in cars.
yeah.
I like it.
I just wanna make
Well,
sure.
I just wanna say something to Monty to make maybe it a little more understandable. Our staff is still small, very small, and they come out on weekends. You come by here any Friday, and maybe the front office isn't open and the public can't get in, but we get in, and they're in there working. It is their 3-day weekend, but they're working. We have a function at the park. Bridget loves that. We have functions all the time. Gary's there Saturday, Sunday, whatever. Dan's there. They show up. These people are there. Jeanette is there on the weekend working. And it's not like we're overpaying any of these people. I'm thankful that they stayed and did their job, and the other guy's job too. I mean, you know the finance work he does, and he's supposed to be just head of the city. He's a figurehead. He's supposed to be telling these other guys what to do. No, he's out there working it. If it's the barbecue, he's out there barbecuing. And setting up a table to show that the city is still here and doing their job. They're not getting what you got as a federal employee, believe me. They're not getting that.
And we still contract a lot of our,
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
most of it's all contract still.
And at 13, you're counting us 5, right?
No, that's plus
Oh,
5.
plus 5, okay.
Plus
We were counted for a while,
That was
but now we
13.
don't even count.
That was 13 full-time employees. Yes.
But he had to sell that to get the, and when we saw the numbers, it matched out. Because our mind is, and my mind is, no recurring liabilities at the end. No CalPERS, things that we're not gonna be able to pay for and all that stuff. That's the main thing, fiscally sound. And all the other cities are asking us how we're doing this, because we watched you guys screw it up so bad that that's what we're fixing. We're gonna make sure that we're not like any of the other cities. We're gonna make sure no unfunded liabilities.
Yeah,
That's how we roll here.
We have no debt and no liabilities.
Well, street lights.
I have to say something real quick, because I think what I was saying was misunderstood. So every year, and I understand $300,000, that's off the table, but every year we're gonna be getting the same amount of money, right? So every year we're gonna present it with something like this, and if I took that $381,000 out of it, that would still put us at that 12.5%, right? So it's not like by doing that, we'd be depleting the reserve fund over 5 years, because that money is replenished every year.
No,
Am I wrong?
It's not replenished.
No, that's
Well,
just
there we
the
go.
fund that you keep.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
But we're getting
the 2 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the only thing, but that's all gone. That isn't.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, none of that goes for us. It's gonna be the.
The 2 million is going, if you look at that last column, the
Yeah.
recommended $2 million going ongoing, that's what we're gonna be spending every year already for the police services we're adding on.
Yeah.
And everything else in the blue that we're gonna do
It's
now
one time.
is money that
Okay,
we
that's
have
what I'm
right
looking
now,
at.
the
That's what
one-time
That's what I'm
fix.
thinking of, okay.
These are the one-time fix items. This won't be next
I'm
year.
really not that dumb.
What I was looking at,
No, I understand. It's complicated.
when I was looking at I was doing the same math, if we went down to 13%, that's $259,000. I was looking at, is that enough to do Bundy, or I'm sorry, not Bundy, but Cottonwood and Lost? And it's still not enough to do Cottonwood and Lost. So we'd have to go down below a 13% reserve, and to me, that's too low.
Okay.
I want us to be that 15%, that's the
Yeah,
fiscally
one
prudent thing to
catastrophe
do.
would wipe us out.
I agree, and there's a lot of cities that carry much higher. I think Marietta, I think there are 22 or something, 25. There's some
Desert of the
desert,
Valley, you know.
there's some desert cities that are at the 40-50% mark. They're really nutty.
Well, we know already if we had a natural disaster where California thinks about Wildomar and the other 4 little cities, they could say, you guys can just rot down there. We're never gonna help you. It was bad enough to get them to sign this thing.
Well, thank you for clarifying those.
I will move
Question.
to accept the recommendations as presented.
I will second that.
I would make a friendly recommendation, we add tip in.
Oh, yes, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so with tip?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think the other thing though is that as we go forward, Gary, obviously we have a lot of other things we want to be looking at here, and I think we need to be looking at, are there any other options out there that we can be exploring as far as funding and
Get more money.
asking more for the state or whatever that is, but I think we need to be looking at other options and not just, because there's too many things that we need to get done in this city. So,
Well, I agree with that because even though, so next year, it'll be $2,013,400 for the police, but with costs going up, that's gonna be increasing.
and we need to tackle the fire issue too.
Right, I
We need
know.
those to Cal Fire.
Two-person paramedic squad.
$300,000 for the county next year, just this July.
Yeah.
Lose it this July, yeah, so there's work to be done.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries, all ayes.